All right. Good morning, everyone. As usual, we start with the health and safety announcement. There's no fire alarm drill anticipated today, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the running man signs above the doors and make your way to the rear of the car park. The organiser of the meeting will tell you when it's safe to return. Toilets are available in the stairwell of the building at each floor landing. Water is available from the water cooler in reception. And finally, please make sure all phones are either muted or switched off, as I always forget to do. So good morning and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 17th of December 2024. I am your chair, Councillor Ollie Davey. At the moment, we don't have a vice chair, so we will elect one in a moment. Supporting officers today are Ed Freeman, Service Lead Planning Strategy and Development Management, Wendy Ormsby, Development Manager, Damien Hunter, Planning Solicitor, and Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. And the presenting officers for today's applications will be Ben Chesters, James Brown, Jamie Quinton, and Callum Moyer. The meeting today is being streamed live to the Council's YouTube account, so can I remind all members and officers contributing to the meeting to use a microphone or your comments will not be heard. We'll now start the meeting by doing, Wendy, at what point should I appoint a vice chair? Should we do it after the roll call?
You can do, or if you want to do it now, it's up to you, Chair.
We'll start with the roll call and then we can check who we've got here.
Thank you, Chair. So if I start with yourself, Councillor Davey.
Present.
And do you have any declarations?
I don't.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Present and no declarations.
Have you signed yourself in?
No.
You need to touch the card on the left-hand side and then press the right-hand button. Or screen, is it, Wendy? I think it's dead.
Right. Now try.
Logging
Yeah.
with it.
Hold on that now. Present, thank you.
There you are.
No declarations, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
That one's warming up.
Present. Thank you. No declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Present, and yes, re-agenda item 10. As this application has taken about 10 years to get to committee, I made comments on this application prior to being on the committee. So therefore, I will make a statement on behalf of the ward members, but I will leave the meeting, so I won't take part in the debate or vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Brown.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Jenny Brown.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Faithful.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Gazzard.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Anne Hall.
Present, no declarations. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith.
I'm present and I have no declarations.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We need a vice chair. So in the absence of Councillor Matt Hall, I've asked Councillor Anne Hall if she will be vice chair. So if everybody can indicate if they're happy with that choice, then I'll ask Anne to come up to the hot seat and get the better view. Okay, item 1 is registered speakers. You can find the speakers for today's applications on page 4 of the agenda. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meetings, pages 5 to 8. Is everybody happy with the minutes? Anybody got any comments on those? And if we're all happy, then if we could all indicate if we're happy for me to sign those minutes as a true and accurate record, please. So all those in favour, and any abstentions? Anyone objecting? No? Okay, that's fine. So I shall sign those minutes. Okay, agenda item 3 is apologies. Wendy?
Yes, Councillor Mike Howe, Councillor Matt Hall, Councillor Dale Haggerty and Councillor Eileen Ragg has sent their apologies.
Okay, declarations of interest we've done. Matters of urgency. Oh, sorry, Steve.
Apologies, Chair. Could I give apologies for Councillor Maddie Chapman?
Oh, right, thank you. Okay, so matters of urgency, there are none. So agenda item 6, any items to be dealt with after the public have been excluded, there are none of those. So agenda item 7, the housing monitoring update to the year ending 31st of March 2024. That's pages 9 to 90 on your agenda. And we have with us Ed Freeman, Assistant Director, Planning, Strategy and Development Management, to present the report, which I'm sure you've had a look at and seen the figures. Over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully members are familiar with these reports and would have seen them coming through before, either through this committee or Strategic Planning Committee. So this is an annual update on our residential completions data and future projections for delivery of housing in the district, from which we then calculate a 5-year housing land supply position, which then has an impact on decision making in terms of whether or not the tilted balance is a material consideration or not. I think members will be familiar with the tilted balance in terms of whether or not we have to give substantial weight to our housing land supply position, potentially over and above existing policies within the adopted local plan. So this annual housing monitoring report went to Strategic Planning Committee on the 29th of November, and they specifically asked for it to be brought to the attention of Planning Committee because of the impact it has on decision making. And you'll see at the time of the report that we were reporting that our housing land supply position was at 4.15 years housing land supply, which at that time meant that we had an adequate supply under the government requirements because of the 4-year housing supply position that was introduced by the previous government in the December 2023 National Planning Policy Framework. But we were reporting that we needed to bolster our supply position to reach a 5-year housing land supply in order to adopt the local plan, because that is a requirement for the plan to be found sound, that we have an adequate housing land supply at that point in time. I do, however, as much as I feel like the bearer of bad news in even saying that, unfortunately the situation has become somewhat worse since I reported that to Strategic Planning Committee by virtue of the publication of the new National Planning Policy Framework last Thursday. This is also an update to the report because our housing land supply position is now worse than that. I don't know if we can share the slides on the screen, Wendy. So these are updated sort of summary tables of the housing land supply position. While the completions data and the future projections have not in themselves changed, what we're calculating them against has, thanks to the new National Planning Policy Framework. So we have to measure our housing supply position against the new standard method figure, which is set in the National Planning Policy Framework, which gives us a requirement of 1,188 homes per year. So that is an increase of just over 200 homes per year on what we were calculating our 5-year housing land supply position against. So obviously that has significantly worsened the position. There is also a new requirement or reintroduced requirement to have a 5% buffer as well. So that makes the situation worse still. So I'm sorry to report, but our 5-year housing land supply position is now 2.97 years. which does very much mean that the tilted balance is in play, and we need to give substantial weight to our housing and supply position for decision-making purposes. And we do still obviously need to get back to a 5-year housing and supply position by the point of adoption of the local plan. I would say that if we have an adopted local plan, the NPPF would allow us to calculate the position against the requirement figure in the local plan, which is likely to be about 950 homes. So that does immediately improve the position compared to this, but the requirement is in a situation where our local plan is out of date, over 5 years old, and in need of updating, we have to go against the standard method figure. So we have to use that higher figure, I'm afraid, in the meantime. So 2.97 is the figure. While I'm here, I would share this, which I shared with Strategic Planning Committee, which is our current forecasted trajectory in terms of housing numbers for both the next 5 years and also the period of the local plan. Apologies, I don't know how clear it is on the screen, but effectively you've got years running across the bottom of the screen. I don't have a cursor. Helps if I use the mouse. So we've got, apparently I have a laser pen as well. Oh, don't get this in Strategic Planning Committee. So we have the first sort of, so each of the columns at the bottom is a year. So it starts 24, 25, 25, 26, so on. So you can see we have a declining position over the next 5 years based on our current projections, because that only takes into account consents. In order to count within the 5 years, it needs to be an actually consented scheme that can be built out in that timescale. So you can see the numbers gradually deplete over time. And then we have a massive uplift beyond that, because we've had to shift everything that's an allocation in the plan or doesn't currently have consent to beyond the 5-year period. So what fundamentally we need to do as a council, I believe, is take some of these green applications, developments as it were, which are allocations coming forward in the emerging local plan, and turn them into orange in these earlier columns, so that we're basically turning allocations that we know are coming forward and have been agreed for allocation in the local plan into consents, and therefore bolstering the supply position in terms of the 5 years. And that can only be done through applications coming through the system and being consented. They are likely to be departures from the current local plan, because obviously the allocations are generally outside of the settlement boundaries that are currently in the adopted local plan. But equally, that's not an unusual situation, I would say, in terms of allocations coming forward ahead of the local plan. Quite often, landowners and developers will deliberately put in an application in advance of examination of a local plan to demonstrate to an inspector that the site is available and deliverable, and ideally they will try and get consent beforehand if they can. Because, again, it's not uncommon for authorities to not have a 5-year house and land supply at this point in the plan cycle where the existing plan is out of date. So really that's a challenge to both us as officers and yourselves as a committee to bring forward applications and bolster that position between now and examination of the local plan, really. Because, as I say, we need to be able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply at the point of adoption of the local plan. So we have a limited time frame in which to do that. I think I'll leave it there for the moment, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, we've got quite a few hands up, so
Peter.
I'll start with Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. So can we get clarification about, because we were working to the 950, and now are you saying that our present new local plan that we're putting together is no longer valid, or is not going to be valid?
That's actually the question I just asked, so we'll give you an answer in a moment on that. Councillor Gazard.
Yeah, mine was a similar question, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, a couple of questions. Obviously, you say it's up to us, which is great, but I presume it's up to the developers to put the plans in the first place. Are you sitting on a lot of plans that are waiting to come to us? Because certainly, as I said, we only get the ones that you put to us. And what weight does the new plan now hold when it gets to Regulation 19? So you say that the present one is out of date. So should we be giving more weight now to the new plan? Should that be taken more into consideration as it gets to the Regulation 19 stage? That's it at the moment. Thank you.
And I'll just add another one, Ed. Is this going to strain the capacity we've got in our planning department? And are we going to need extra staff or extra meetings of planning committee over the next however many months it is until we put this plan forward in order to manage to even permit these applications on the assumption, as Councillor Barlow says, that they're coming through? And you've got another one you want to add?
Yeah, just one other thing. Obviously, there's talk of the white paper on devolution. Does that make any difference? Because obviously we've got Somerset and Dorset, again, they're doing local plans. They've got to up their numbers as well. Are they going to be coming to us for more numbers on top of this? And if we are joining up with all the rest of the district councils in Devon, does that make a difference on where we're at with this plan?
Yes. So, are you sitting comfortably? This might take a while. So, if I come back to Councillor Faithful's question to start with. So, in terms of the emerging local plan, we've been planning for a requirement figure of 946 homes per year. The new National Planning Policy Framework gives us transitional arrangements that enable us to progress a plan on a lower figure than the remind myself. 1,188. If we get the Reg 19 plan out to consultation by the 12th of March next year. In order to benefit from those transitional arrangements, the requirement figure in the Reg 19 plan needs to be 80% at least of 1,188. Now, 80% of that is 950. So we're a tiny bit short, but we have built 10% of headroom into the plan. So my current thinking, and bearing in mind this was only published last Thursday, so this is still emerging thinking, my current thinking is that we can hopefully still progress with the plan as currently agreed by Strategic Planning Committee, and meets the requirement figure that we need to be within the transitional arrangements and have sufficient headroom or buffer built into the plan, but it won't be quite 10%. So no, the answer is fundamentally no. I don't think we need to reopen the local plan. I think we can move forward as envisaged by Strategic Planning Committee. If I skip to then weight to be attributed to that plan, essentially a new plan can carry more weight the more advanced it is. Fundamentally, we haven't been giving any significant weight to it because it's up to this point, because it's only been at Reg 18 stage. It's been a draft plan. We've been considering options and not actually nailed down what the plan's going to say. I think once we publish the Reg 19 version of the plan, that is the council saying, this is our plan, this is what we are intending to take forward to examination, so we can start to give limited weight to it. And then progressively, we need to keep track of how much weight we then give to it. So, for example, if at the end of that consultation, a particular policy has no objections to it, then you can give more weight to that because you know that that's unlikely to be a significant issue at the examination, and that policy should therefore progress through the examination relatively unchallenged. If you've got a policy that, for example, has 100 objections to it and is hugely controversial, then we'd have to moderate the weight we give to that. So that's something we need to do as officers and advise you as a committee as we move forward. where those policies are relevant on individual applications. Certainly with the previous local plan, we produced a sort of RAG rating system by policy based on how much weight should be given to each of those, which we helped to inform the officers and then for them to advise members in terms of their reports. So thinking of a similar approach in this case. So we'll advise you accordingly, but yes, certainly once it's out to consultation, I think we can start to give limited weight to that. In terms of bolstering the supply position, yes, we do need applications to be made. Obviously, you had some already. I think at your previous committee, you considered applications in both Livingston and Woodbury that are allocations coming forward in the local plan, and you granted those. I think they were both outlined from memory. In terms of those moving forward, so hopefully those will progress through the system. Hopefully publication of the Reg 19 version of the plan will give confidence also to landowners and developers to start to bring forward applications for those sites ahead of the local plan. There are some others, I believe, in the system, but not a huge number. So we need to see what happens in terms of those coming forward. But I would be surprised if we didn't start to see more applications starting to come in for those sites, given the assurance of having them in a hopefully published Regulation 19 plan. In terms of staff capacity, we'll have to keep an eye on that, I think, as things progress and see what applications come in and what impact that has on staffing and resources. Of course, one benefit will be a lot of those applications will be quite major applications and carry significant fees, which may well give us the resources to help to address that. Obviously, members might be aware in terms of so far this financial year, we've not had that many major applications coming in, and so the fees are actually down quite a bit, even though workloads are still quite high, because we've received high numbers of more minor applications that still create quite a lot of work but don't generate the fees, because those more minor applications, the fee that the government charge is probably about half of what it actually costs to deal with the application. Something that the government are looking to address and made announcements about last Thursday alongside the National Planning Policy Framework about boosting those fees so that they are on a cost recovery basis, which we hope will help us in the future to fund the service and additional staff capacity if it's needed, picking up on the Chair's point. Finally, in terms of the white paper, the devolution white paper was actually published yesterday, if people haven't seen that. I mean, it's too soon to say what might happen with that and what impacts that might have. I think they are some way off in the future, realistically, so I don't think it really has an impact on what we're doing today in terms of decision making or in terms of how we're progressing this local plan. I think it's more about we'll have more of an impact on how we progress future local plans and potentially joint strategies on planning between ourselves and other authorities that may form part of a unitary authority, or at least through the combined authority approach that's already progressing. And obviously we have the duty to cooperate already that we still need to work within, particularly in terms of relationships with Exeter City, and we know of concerns raised by Torbay as well in terms through the local plan process. Exeter just launched their consultation on their Regulation 19 plan as well. So we'll be bringing a report to Strategic Planning Committee early in the new year, probably at the February meeting, to consider our response to their plan, and no doubt they'll be doing the same with ours. But we have been working reasonably closely with Exeter and our partners within the Greater Exeter area throughout the process. I think that picks up on all the questions, but happy to take any further ones.
I think we've got a couple of supplementaries. Councillor Faithful again.
Thank you. 6-year housing land supply, what was that about? Could you explain?
I've got one from Jenny Brown as well. So, Jenny?
Okay, so you're saying that you need planning applications brought forward, yet we were looking at one today that was almost 10 years ago, given outline, and it's still going through the system. What powers have you got to actually force developers, if they get outline or they get full, to do it in a certain number of years? Because it's not, they're blaming the committee, they're blaming the planning department, but it's not us holding it up, it is the developers.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the 6-year housing land supply, so the new National Planning Policy Framework has a requirement about a 6-year housing land supply requirement in certain circumstances. So off the top of my head, those circumstances were about where a plan doesn't meet the 80% transitional arrangement requirement and is out of date. So that will take effect at a certain point. Need to get our heads around exactly when, how that might impact on us. But yes, there is a danger that at a point in time, we will need to actually deliver a 6-year housing land supply requirement. We're still getting our heads around all of this. We will bring a report to Strategic Planning Committee in due course detailing how we address all of these issues. But I think the key thing for today is obviously we don't have an adequate supply. The tilted balance is in play and that needs to be factored into your decision making. In terms of I would say in terms of the second question, obviously the circumstances around the Farlands application are slightly unique. I think that it's fair to say that that application was very premature in terms of when and how that was made. I think that application was made well in advance of the Cranbrook expansion areas being allocated and the Cranbrook plan coming forward. And the only reason it's so old is that we reached an agreement with the applicants to hold that in the system until the policy position has basically caught up with what they were trying to achieve, rather than us just rejecting it and then them having to reapply. So I wouldn't worry too much about how old that application is. It's obviously then taken time to then negotiate and ensure that it's in compliance with the Cranbrook plan and the current policy position for us to then be able to bring that forward to you with a positive recommendation. But in terms of applications, yes, obviously we need applications to be coming in to progress these sites. And then obviously we need to ensure that we've got reassurance that they are going to deliver those sites in a reasonable timescale. We do have powers in terms of looking at the lifespan of that permission. Do we give them 3 years to implement, for example, is a question. It's a double-edged sword, because if you reduce the amount of time you give them to implement, if they don't implement in that time, then it falls out of our 5-year housing land supply, because they no longer have consent and obviously they can't then deliver it. But equally, we want them to deliver more quickly. And that might motivate them to do that. So I think it's a conversation we need to have with developers that are bringing forward sites on that basis. You know, the allocations in the new local plan that could potentially deliver within the next 5 years, and get reassurance from them about their delivery trajectories and what their intentions are. And then we'll have to review on a case-by-case basis whether or not we give them the full 3 years to implement or not. I mean, the other issue with that is obviously they could make a material start and then sit on the site. So it's not guaranteed, even if you reduce that to try and encourage them to commence development more quickly, that they won't just make a material start and mothball the site. So I'm not convinced necessarily that fluctuating the timescales we give them is the best approach. I think I would rather work with them and try and negotiate and agree trajectories for how they and when they'll deliver the sites, and take that into account.
What does a material start include? Or could you actually strengthen the material starts?
Through you, Chair. So the 3-year time period for a planning permission simply requires them to make a material start within that 3-year period. A material start could be as little as digging a section of foundation and filling it, or putting in the access. It might deliver absolutely no homes whatsoever, at which point it's not helped us in terms of our 5-year housing land supply. So my point is we just need to be mindful of that what we don't want is to be issuing consents on the basis that it's going to help to bolster our 5-year housing land supply, and then that happen and it's not achieved that result. So I think we need some reassurance from developers as to what their intentions are.
Okay, if there's no more questions, then I'll thank Ed for his report and Merry Christmas. And okay, we'll move on to more good news. We'll look at the planning appeal statistics now with an update from the development manager, Wendy Ormsby.
Good morning. So we've actually had quite a few decisions in, which is good to see since last committee. A few more allowed than we would normally see. Ones that just worth a mention, just to clarify that 240605 FUL at Clapper and Tail Farm, Escott Park, Ottery St Mary, that was allowed, and that was for the retention of a static caravan on the site, which had been lived in. So it was a retrospective application. And just to clarify that the inspector allowed that, but as a personal permission only. So once the current occupant vacates the site, it wouldn't be able to be occupied furthermore. It was quite an unusual decision, because the inspector agreed with all of the points, which the council had refused it, but then gave weight to the fact that the occupier, who seemed to be living there for a while, would become homeless if the permission wasn't granted, which, as I said, is an unusual approach, because obviously that does sort of, it's not something we've normally seen insofar as there was no specific circumstances around that particular occupier. Sometimes if an occupier has got some particular special reasons or circumstances that would mean that an alternative form of accommodation was unlikely, they might give that. But in this case, that wasn't, and the inspector just decided to grant that as a personal permission, which, as I said, isn't the usual approach. And then moving on, there was the application at Collerton Way, Exmouth, which was separating a single dwelling into two. Members may recall that one. That came to committee with an officer recommendation to approve, and was refused principally, I think, on grounds of concerns about lack of parking, etc. And the inspector took the view that that parking would be adequate and there would be adequate amenity. So that one was allowed. And then following on from that, ones of note. So a further one, which was a committee decision 221973 MOUT, land east of Sidmouth Road, Ottery St Mary, outline application for 63 dwellings. That came to committee with an officer recommendation to approve, and that appeal was dismissed. The inspector took the view that the landscape harm outweighed the benefit of providing housing on that site. Reading through the report, the inspector was talking about, specifically about, to make quite a lot of references to housing density, etc. But ultimately took the view that the landscape harm was significant. And those are the appeals decisions, I think, that are noteworthy. But if anybody's got any questions about any of the others, please let me know. No? Okay, thank you.
No, doesn't look like it. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on then to agenda item 9, planning application 242049 MFUL, land to the south of Shercroft Close, Station Road, Broadclist, and that's pages 111 to 148 in your agenda pack. And over to, who's presenting this one? Ben?
Ben Chesters.
Yeah, Ben Chesters. Okay, over to you, Ben.
Excellent. Right, figured out right button to press. Okay, so this application is for the creation of some additional SANGS land, so that's suitable alternative natural green space as a country park, alongside the creation of a car park and various other, such as footpaths and cycle storage. It's required because through the appropriate assessment with the early stages of Cranbrook, they need some extra recreational land essentially to reduce the pressures on the sensitive landscapes of Woodbury Common and the ex-estuary. So to give you an idea of the setting of the site, in this instance, you've got Station Road running along here from the former Broadcliff Station up the top there, down towards London Road, the old A30, across here somewhere. There's a number of residential properties on this particular boundary here on the northeastern side of the site. To the southwest, it's largely either undeveloped or commercial development at the current time. The red line here that you can see going through the site where the pointer's going now, that's where Devon County Council have already granted themselves planning consent for a cycleway through the site. So that permission is already in place via Devon County Council. So to take a closer look at sort of what's proposed in the site, you can see there's a number of footpaths that we're proposing. And the cycleway, which is wider than the footpaths, that's going to be somewhere in the region of just short of 4 meters wide, about 3.7 I measured it as. Whereas the footpaths, these bits here, are going to be around about 1.9 wide. There's two accesses that's being proposed. There's a pedestrian and cycle one here, and the car park and the vehicular entrance just here. And we'll take a closer look at those in just a moment. So this is the pedestrian cycle entrance. You've got the property in one of the properties in Shercroft Close is just here. And you can see there's various hard and soft landscaping proposed in that area. Cycle storage here, and a hedge bank along there to bolster the screening to the residential property here. And then if we take a look at the other entrance, this is an existing agricultural entrance into the land that it's proposed to be using for the vehicular entrance off the corner on the road there, and then to create a driveway into the car park, which has got 16 spaces, including disabled parking and cycle storage here as well as appropriate soft and hard landscaping, including hedge banks to sort of to landscape the area really. There's going to be a number of boundaries within the site. They will largely take the form of fences and gates of the nature that you can see there. Also a hedge bank in some places as well, one of which we've spoken about, another of which we'll see when we're looking at the pictures in just a moment. There's also going to be one area of slightly different fencing, and that is because what I should have pointed out earlier on was on the north-western boundary of the site is the Honiton, the Exeter to Waterloo railway line, and Network Rail have requested that there's a trespass-proof fence along that boundary there, for obvious reasons really, to stop people being able to access the railway from the site. So that's what that fence will look like, and it would only be put on the boundary with the railway. That's the only place that a fence of that nature is proposed within the site. So in terms of what it looks like in the site, they're flat fields essentially. You can see here, this is the boundary on the northeastern side to some of the residential properties. So that particular boundary is very well wooded. The railway runs roughly along here, give or take. So that's obviously part of the sort of northwestern part of the site that I've taken those pictures from. These properties here, they're in Shercroft Close. As you can see, the boundary's not as strong there. This is within the curtilage of the properties. So it's actually proposed to construct a Devon bank along here to bolster that screening further from the site. The works that you can see in the photo here, they're not to do with the proposal. That's South West Water, who were doing some sewage works when I was there doing the site visit. So that's not part of the proposal or anything of that nature. This is in the sort of southwestern part of the site. You can see some of the commercial development I referred to there, and you can also see within the site there's some reasonably strong hedge boundaries as well as on the edge of it. This is back in the northwestern or western part of the site. As you can see, it's quite wet in places, and this is an existing ditch that's just sort of had some works done to it just to enable it to drain a bit more freely. And the railway runs roughly along here. Speaking of the railway, there it is. The trespass-proof fence, so I mentioned, that would run along this boundary here and only along that boundary there. So looking back from where the railway is, roughly, that is, again, you can see that very strong boundary to some of the residential properties there and the general flat nature of the fields. This next picture, I'm stood roughly where the car park would be. Again, that's South West Water's works that are taking place there, so that's not part of the proposal. As you can probably imagine, wellies were the order of the day when doing that site visit. The next picture, this is one of the existing gaps in the hedge that the paths would go through. This particular one actually is where Devon County Council cycle path would go through. And then finally, just to take a look at the entrances. So this is on Shercroft Close. This is where the pedestrian and cycle entrance would go in. Just here, so you can see at the moment it's a little bit overgrown, so arguably it would improve that site there. And then this is the same, but from the inside of the site. So you can see the importance of the proposed landscaping there with the hedge bank, just to firm up this boundary with the residential property there. And then final two pictures. This is taken from the existing entrance that is proposed to use for the car park. In that case, I'm looking southeast down towards London Road, and in this case, I'm looking up to the northwest towards Broadcliffe Station. So you can see that there that it's on the outside of a corner, but visibility is pretty good. So finally, just some points to consider. The principle of the proposal is supported by Strategy 10 of the local plan. We've not received any objections from technical consultees, parish council, ward members, or members of the public, and we feel there'd be no detrimental impact on the residents of those occupying the adjoining properties. Some of the technical consultees have recommended conditions, and we consider that they're appropriate. However, of course, for the national rail condition, what they proposed was to actually ask us to seek details of a trespass-proof fence. Clearly, we now already have those. So that then comes up in the recommendation, and the recommendation is that the application is approved, subject to the conditions listed in the report. However, we received the details of the trespass-proof fence after the publication of the report. Network Rail have confirmed that they're okay with it, so it's also recommended that the condition 10 is amended to say that in actual fact that the fence should be installed along the entire boundary of Network Rail land and retained and maintained for the lifetime of the development in accordance with the details shown on the plan. And that's all there is I've got to say currently on that one.
Thank you, Ben. I've just got one quick question. The cycle parking is going to be with the car parking, but the cycle path, it kind of exits via Shercroft Close, and there's another exit I can see on the sort of western side. Will cyclists be able to get will they be able to cycle down to where the parking is? Would it not be more sensible to put the cycle parking by the existing entrance, or by the proposed entrance from Shercroft Close?
Yeah, okay. So there's a bit of cycle parking also proposed at the Shercroft Close entrance. I'm just sort of drawing around it with a red line on the screen now. So there's a small amount of cycle parking proposed there, and also some down at the car park as well. So there's possibilities for the cycle parking at the car park is for people to arrive by bike, park up, and go for a walk around the site. Whereas I suppose the same could be argued actually for the other parking, but because you don't need a car park, do you, to park a bike? But so yes, there's cycle parking at both entrances.
So the access for cycles would be the same as the vehicle entrance in that case?
It would be to the car park, to the cycle parking in the car park.
Yeah.
But for the other cycle parking, obviously they can come along the cycle path as and when Devon County have built it further off the site, down towards Exeter. Then people could arrive from that direction to park there, or of course they could come in from Shercroft Close and park their bikes there instead.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One, will there be, or has there been any archaeological search, whatever you call it? I can't remember the name.
I think that's a condition, isn't
Yeah,
it?
but has it happened, or because would it have happened before South West Water went through and ripped the whole place apart? The other question is, all this drainage, surely it will have an impact on the wildlife because it's wetter ground at the moment. So if you're going to drain it, you're going to dry it out and make a substantial difference to the type of wildlife that you're going to have on the site.
Okay, shall I take, I've got another question as well, Ben, so if we take them together.
Not done the speakers yet. We need to do
Oh,
the
I'm
speakers,
sorry.
Yeah, before we start taking questions.
Okay, I'm departing from my script. Okay, yes, so I'm so sorry. We need to hear from the applicant, Paul Osborne, and you have 3 minutes, and also from the ward member, Councillor Fernley, and that may answer some of the questions that we might have. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Is that working okay? Yes. Here. So, good morning and thank you. I'm Ben Chesters. Thank you, because you've covered lots of things I was going to say, so I'll keep it really brief. So I'm speaking as the applicant. I'm the Green Infrastructure Project Manager for East Devon District Council. As Ben's outlined, the new country park will be a SANG, and as well as meeting our requirements under the South East Devon mitigation strategy, it also is aligning with the Clyst Valley Park regional objectives and providing that station road to Moss Lane cycle link. Eventually that cycle link will connect onwards into Cranbrook, so the connection there will be linking Moss Lane, Tithe Barn residential areas near to Exeter through the site and linking with Cranbrook into Cranbrook Station and Town Centre in due course. Just for clarity, the country park will meet Natural England's SANG requirements. So that is, it needs to be a natural green space that enables people to enjoy recreation and access to nature. It has to be a large site with walking routes of up to 2.5 kilometres in circular routes. It needs to be secure so that dog owners can let the dogs off the lead, and it's intended to mitigate the impact of residential development on the estuary and Pebblebed Heaths, so hence that dog-friendly nature. We need to provide good connections with the adjacent residential areas and then parking at a suitable level. So the 16 car parking spaces that we're providing, which includes disabled parking spaces and cycling parking, will meet that. In the original proposals, which were consulted on in 2023, there was parking proposed at Shercroft Close in the area that's on the screen at the moment. Following that consultation, there was a lot of feedback from residents that were concerned about having parking that close to their houses, particularly as there's a limited area there, the number of parking spaces and the potential for overflow into their street. So by moving the car park to the area it currently is, we can provide double the number of parking spaces and remove that concern. I think that's reflected in the fact that we haven't had any objections, and we've had a couple of letters of support as well. Picking up on Councillor Faithful's point, the country park will also enhance the habitats on the site, which include coastal grazing marsh, hedgerows, mature trees, which are already home to a kind of fairly diverse range of species, and will deliver 10% biodiversity net gain. the works, the ditches that were shown in the photographs, there are existing ditches on the site. The works that have been undertaken are to improve those, not necessarily from a drainage function, but actually from a biodiversity value, to improve the profile of those ditches, increase the water retention in them. And as part of the scheme, we'll also be putting in some leaky dams, which kind of brush piles of the twigs, which slow down that water and make sure there's a water level there to help plants and invertebrates to establish. And I think my last point is just to say that we own the site, obviously, the District Council, and should consent be granted, that it will be managed as Cliff Meadows Country Park by our Countryside Services team. That's in partnership with the Parish Council and the local community. So that will enable our team to, as well as providing SANG function, have events and activities on the site similar to those that occur at Seaton Wetlands or other reserves, which will include opportunities for volunteering and recreational activities for the local community. So that is everything I was going to say. So hopefully that's responded to the point on the drainage and biodiversity. On archaeology, we did a baseline appraisal of the site, which identified limited potential for archaeological remains on the site, but we will be doing site inspection work overseeing during the car park creation, which is the main risk of any archaeology being there. Unfortunately, South West Water came through under their powers, put their sewer in and stripped the land without doing that work beforehand. But the county archaeologist is content that there wasn't any harm to any archaeology in them doing that, because we've been in with our consultants afterwards to review what they've done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. And Councillor Paula Fernley. You're going to speak
Thank you,
from
Chair.
there, Paula. Yep.
As ward member for Broadcliff, I wish to support the Cliff Meadows planning application. Cliff Meadows is close to a rapidly expanding area of the district. Residents welcome access to another beautiful green space they can take their families to and walk their dogs. The flat path will be great for accessibility. East Devon has consulted with the local residents and changed the layout to provide the best possible design for everyone. In view of climate change and the need for active travel, the cycle infrastructure will be a great addition to the local green infrastructure, providing a more pleasant rural route from Station Road to Tithe Barn and beyond, and hopefully one day onto the Cliffs Valley Trail, as well as for the next phase of the Cranbrook expansion. I'm looking forward to the opportunities for nature education for local people in conjunction with Broadcliff Parish Council, Broadcliff Environment Group and local schools. So I'd like to thank Paul Osborne and the team for work on this application. This is an excellent opportunity that doesn't come up very often. Let's grab it with both hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we can go for questions. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, statement, it's amazing that we can get planning applications through in some speed. 9th of October validated, 17th of December, here we are. Well done. Presume this will be the new way forward.
It's a lot easier when we own the land.
Okay. The cycle shelters. Why are we having cycle shelters? Why do we need a cycle shelter in a field where people are going to do some exercise? Is it really necessary? Is it something in this supposed to be saving carbon and resources, etc., that we should be putting up? Especially when I'm told other ones in Cranbrook have been taken down because they were vandalised so many times that they were just seemed pointless.
I think that question may be better directed at Paul, if you don't mind. You could speak from there, Paul, if... no, you go where Wendy tells you, because she's in charge.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's a good question. We provide cycle parking on site to make sure that people who wish to travel by cycle to the site can do so and lock their bikes securely. I think the carbon point is a critical one. If we want to transition to a low carbon society, we need to make sure that people who cycle can have somewhere safe, secure and actually dry to store their bikes. And so this is why we provided this as a cycle shelter as an option on the site. We have spoken to the police architectural liaison officer about this, who was concerned. So the shelter that we're proposing will have a roof over it, but not sides, to increase visibility, and it will be reasonably active in relation to the car park location, which is why we put it there rather than by Shercroft Close, which is close to properties. And sorry, I've lost my track now. I guess the last point is it does relate to lighting as well. The car park's not lit, but the country park will be used the majority of the time during daylight hours. People are unlikely to be going to walk their dogs and have recreational activities during the dark. And the discussion with the police architectural liaison officer was if we put lighting in there, whilst that might improve the perceived security of the area, actually it might also encourage people to come and hang out there because they feel that it's a comfortable place to do so. So the balance is that providing cycle shelter will support people who wish to use bikes to cycle to the site, but it will also, the balance, the designers tried to do that in a way that wouldn't encourage antisocial behaviour.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Ian?
Well, not really. Again, you're putting a building in the countryside that, and I listened to what the gentleman says, is it really necessary? Are we doing it? Anyway, but I've heard the reason why you think it should be needed.
It's a small shelter with a very small roof. I think the carbon footprint of that is pretty small compared to the carbon savings by cycling, and it's going to have something like a 10, 15, 20-year lifespan. I'm sure it'll repay any carbon savings. Councillor Bloxham.
Thank you. It's not actually a question for you, Paul, but my experience in Cranbrook is, and I'm going to support Councillor Barlow here, we had a cycle shelter with a roof that didn't last 5 minutes. It was in a car park, well lit, lots of people using it, but unfortunately those that wanted to destroy it destroyed it many times, and eventually it was removed and the stands for the cycles were just left there. So it's well used, but not anymore as a covered area. So I can only support what Councillor Barlow says. I think you might find that a bit of a waste of time.
I've got a feeling current advice on cycling is to provide covered shelters. It's just more attractive, tempts people more. Okay, Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Will there be any picnic area, or will visitors have to eat their lunch in their car?
No, there are proposals to have various seats and picnic benches around the site as well. But they don't necessarily need planning consent, which is why they're not showing up on the plans in the way that the paths are and the cycle storage, for example.
Thanks, Ben. Good question, Peter. Yeah. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Question about the amount of car parking. You've got 16, but 14 normal. Is this actually large enough to future-proof the area when there's a lot more building going on? What was your methodology to get to that number? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think this is not an exact science, unfortunately. The car parks in the other Sang sites, Dawlish Countryside Park, Ridgetop Park, are similar in size. Dawlish is bigger, but it's a much bigger site. It's a 25-hectare site rather than this being a 10-hectare site. So we've taken a reasonable position. There would be potential to expand the car park in the future if it was an issue. So if you see on the plan that's shown on the screen at the moment, the area to the northwest there is just open meadow. If we wanted to, we could provide additional parking at future dates. And there is to the immediate northwest of the central access, the car park, there's the gate just there. So you could extend through that gate, keep the hedge that's in the middle of the car park and just build some more car parking beyond that, so you wouldn't need to remove the new hedge at that point.
Thank you. Good to hear it's going to be future-proofed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no more questions, Paul, thank you very much for coming here and helping with the details. Okay, we'll move on then. Councillor Barlow.
Recommend approval, so yeah, as recommended.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor
I will second it at the same time as my point was only to thank you for the considerations slide. I always find it really useful after the images and pictures to have that condensed of the report. So thank you.
Okay, so we have a proposer and a second. Anybody wish to speak on this one? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to Councillor Bloxham and Councillor Barlow regarding the cycle sheds. And I agree with them, what's the point? So at this stage, can we say that I would personally agree with the whole plan, but let's take away the cycle sheds. We've heard from Councillor Bloxham, they get wrecked in a very short period of time. So there's no point in persisting and wasting money. And I'd like to put in the proposal that the cycle sheds are removed. If that's possible, Chair.
Well, we've already had a proposer and a seconder for the application. As it's gotten in, I think the applicants may wish to consider that, but my personal feeling is that vandalism, or the potential for vandalism, should never be a reason to retreat from doing something. I always take the attitude of New York when there was a mayor, and whenever anything was wrecked, they just put it back again, and eventually that sort of died out. I think probably other measures went with it. Councillor Barlow.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, we've got to look at what's in front of us, but I think the other point is that as long as they make a substantial start on it, they don't always have to finish it. So if they didn't want to put them up, and having listened to what we've said, perhaps they will reconsider that. Yes.
Yep. Okay, so I think we've made the point, and I think we can let it rest at that and let the applicants have a think about that one. Perhaps consult with local people. Okay, so we have a proposer and seconder, so all in favour?
And the
We-
amendment to condition 10.
Oh, there's an amendment to condition 10. Okay. Which one was that?
The railway
That was the
fencing.
railway. We've added that since, haven't we? Yeah. Okay, that's fine then. So that is with condition 10. Do you want a vote on that one as well, just to ensure that we've covered? Okay, so I'll just propose from the chair that condition 10 is added to the permission. So all those in favour? We just have to do it again to make sure that we've, make sure that we've put that in. Yeah. Our legal eagle is happy, so we can move on unless anybody has a. We've gone for an hour. Does anybody want a break before we consider this major planning application? Shall we? Yeah. Shall we? Yeah. Shall we take 10 minutes? Come back at 11:15, and then we'll look. Yeah, I think the next one might be a long one, so we'll have a break now. Okay, we're all back, I think.
Damien.
Oh,
Oh.
right.
What's he like, eh?
I know, eh? Just, yeah, just wait for our solicitor to come back. Okay, we'll resume with planning application 142945 MOUT, Farlands London Road, Wimpole, on pages 149 to 228 in your agenda pack. And we have the new community officer, James Brown, not the James Brown, to present the report.
I won't be
Sorry,
singing.
James.
I won't be singing today, I'm afraid.
Had that so many times.
I have had it a few times, yes.
I was in a soul band, you know, so
Oh.
James Brown is God.
Good morning, members. Thank you. This application is a proposal for 260 houses, a neighbourhood centre, and junior sports pitch, and it forms part of the Cobden's expansion area at Cranbrook. The red line plan that is on the screen before you, I thought we'd updated this on the presentation, but clearly we haven't. But just to confirm on this plan that the, how does this work? The verge that sits between the splay and the site is now included in the red line to allow for some of the enabling infrastructure to go in as well. So that's just a minor technical update, just to clarify at this stage. So the application site itself sits as part of the Cobden's expansion area. It's highlighted in the red dotted outline that's on screen, and sits between the Ingram sports pitches, which are already now up and running, and the Persimmon Cobden scheme, which came before you earlier this year for 1,495 dwellings. So this forms an important linking component between those two sites. As members have already picked up on this morning, this is a particularly old application, and I think that the circumstances for its age and delay in coming before you are unique, as Mr. Freeman outlined to you, principally because of prematurity when it was first submitted. But then in more recent years, the work that we've done with the applicants in terms of picking up some of the technical details and making sure that an application that was submitted nearly 10 years ago actually complies with current standards, habitat surveys, and in particular SANGs and habitat mitigation, which is an important consideration as part of this application. Yes, the site is relatively flat. It can be well linked with the surrounding sites, but habitat mitigation is an important component because we want to make sure that residents on here don't produce or don't play and cause additional unnecessary pressure to the heathland and to the ex-estuary. And the discussions we've had with the applicant have ensured that they are, while not on site, they are now able to deliver some off-site SANGs to support this scheme, which itself has a resolution to approve through Chair's delegation from 10 days ago. That in itself ties in with the first two recommendations that you've got before you this morning, which is to adopt the appropriate assessment that reflects that habitat mitigation delivery. The main recommendation 2, is to approve the scheme. We've already touched on the fact that the site is well located and can be well integrated to existing Cranbrook. But I think probably the principal issue, which I'll spend a few moments to talk to you about, is the London Road and the access to the site. I'm very aware that this has caused some local concern. And in particular, linking it back to the situation that we find at Station Road in Cranbrook, which is right over the other side of the town, where there is a priority T junction off the London Road heading north in much the same, at least alignment as this, if not in junction design. And there are a number of points of difference that I want to draw your attention to here when you're considering this particular part of the scheme. And that is that the Station Road itself forms a key connection between London Road and Broadclist, and is currently a main route for a number of HGV vehicles from the trading estates that operate further up the road. Whereas this scheme is for 260 dwellings as part of an urban extension with links to neighbouring sites. In addition, the visibility display and the safety of the junction at Station Road, I would suggest, is less good than this particular scheme, where really good visibility can be achieved along the road. What that doesn't do, however, is in itself change the conditions of London Road, which in this location is notoriously fast. It's a straight open section. And one of the things that this scheme is seeking to do is to reduce the speed along the road through the junction design, through the delivery of raised tables, and the character of London Road, which they're seeking to change. In addition, this then plays into the wider London Road improvements, which are set to come forward as part of the already consented Persimmon scheme. Now, my apologies, this is not the clearest plan, but it's the best one that I've got to try and explain this to you. So there are 3 sections to this plan, each forming a continuation of the previous, whereby on the top section, we've got the current site that's before us this morning in the top left-hand corner, with the improvements that you've just seen on the previous slide. They then will join in with the improvements that Persimmon are set to deliver as part of their consent on the rest of those 3 sections. So again, along the top row there, you've got a signalised junction into the main part of their scheme, with right-hand turning lane. Then moving further along into the middle section of the plan, you have the end of the raised table for the principal junction, secondary raised tables for further indicative accesses, and then the bottom part of the continuation there, 2 further raised table sections, including into the Gypsy and Traveller access, which again forms a consented access. So you've got that's the Gypsy and Traveller access, which has got raised table. You've then got raised tables for the indicative Persimmon junctions there and there, and these all join up. And then you've got an elongated raised table and priority junction that comes back along here with signalised facilities into the principal junction, into the whole of the Cobden's area there. The one we're looking at today is the one that's highlighted in red here. So this then sort of forms the next stage in that journey along London Road as you're heading westbound, with the specific details that are set out on this slide here. So that there forms a boundary between the Farland scheme that's before you today and the Persimmon scheme that you considered back in February, I think. So that forms, I think, the main issue that is under consideration or has raised concerns, certainly. County Highways have looked at this in great detail. The junction arrangements have been subject to a road safety audit, independently carried out and then verified by Devon County Council. And in all that, they have concluded that this junction is safe and appropriate for the scale of development that it is looking to serve. Having said all that, the recommendation is then printed on the papers in front of you. I have two further updates for you in relation to that recommendation. The first relates to a late consultation response we've had from South West Water, which we've sought principally because their last response was in 2019, and this again partly sort of picks up on the age of the application, so we've been trying to make sure that everything's up to date before we came to you today. They've quite helpfully given us a 3.5-page response. I don't propose to read it in full, unless Chair wants me to, but I will summarise just some of the key elements from it which affect the conditions that we are proposing are applied to the scheme. The headlines are they continue to raise no objections to the scheme, but what they are seeking is a condition in respect of potable clean drinking water, for which they've got improvement works underway and programmed. And what they're seeking is that the occupation of dwellings are, through a gramping condition, are restricted until they've concluded their potable water improvement works. We've got confirmation that those are planned work, so will take place. So we've got the confidence that we can impose such a condition. They are also seeking a further condition to go beyond the current the standard building regs, to impose and enhance the enhanced building regs, which is building regs G2, which basically put in place a it requires greater restrictions on services and how water is used within and around individual properties. So it reduces water consumption for the particular house. It can be supported by E7 local plan policies, and therefore we think is a reasonable approach to take in this instance. And the third condition that they're seeking is a foul sewages management plan, which effectively would supersede condition 7 in your existing papers. They are satisfied that there is capacity within the system, but what they are asking for is that the applicant demonstrates and goes through, provides additional details on and within the scheme in terms of the volume of wastewater, construction control plans, timetable for construction. It's not a particularly onerous condition, but it just gives South West Water that additional information to help make sure they can programme going forwards. And certainly, I think it is an entirely reasonable condition, given where we are and the scale of the scheme. The final update I have is to pick up on the presentation that Mr. Freeman gave you earlier this morning in terms of the NPPF changes and the need to give particular weight to housing schemes that are coming forward. In this instance, the site is an existing allocation. It has gone through the Cranbrook Plan, the adopted Cranbrook Plan, and therefore it should be given significant weight in any decisions that you take on this scheme. At this stage, I've got no further updates to make, and therefore the recommendation is as printed, subject to the South West Water conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll just check those new conditions have been agreed with the applicant, have they?
I have discussed the headlines with the applicant, yes. We need to tidy up the precise wording, but the headlines have been agreed, yes.
Yeah, that's fine. So we'll move on to the applicant then, or the agent, Alex Bullock, please. And you have 3 minutes.
Members, many thanks for the opportunity to address the committee this morning. My name is Alex Bullock and I'm the Head of Planning at Land Value Alliances. I'm speaking today on behalf of the applicant in support of this application. The application before you has been in the system for a number of years, as we've already heard, but is one that is on land allocated for residential development as part of the Cobden's expansion area. The land surrounding the site already benefits from planning permission granted to Persimmon, and this application provides for the balance of this expansion area. Today's committee for us is an important milestone and is the culmination of working positively and collaboratively with officers at East Devon and Devon County Council, such that all technical matters, including the means of access, which ties into the Persimmon approval, have been robustly addressed as detailed within the comprehensive report produced by officers. In particular, we have worked hard to identify and bring forward our own SANG solution, which has been a key part of the delay in the determination of this application, the location of which, in our opinion, enhances and complements existing consented SANG at Treesbere. We fully recognise that committee resolution is the next milestone, and given the focus of government, attention is also focused on delivery. On this scheme, we already have a draft Section 106 under discussion. It is one that if we achieve a positive outcome today, we're keen to conclude promptly. Whilst I'm unable to confirm the name of the house builder publicly, I can confirm we have recently agreed heads of terms on the potential sale to a national house builder who has a strong regional presence. That party, like ourselves, is keen to move the site forward in a prompt manner. To conclude, we hope that you will be able to support the strong and clear officer recommendation before you and resolve the grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The ward member, Councillor Kim Bloxham, Kim, you have 5 minutes and you're going to speak and then leave us once
Yep.
you've spoken. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. All 3 ward members and the Town Council have been consistent in their comments that the proliferation of uncontrolled junctions along this short section of London Road is unacceptable. Highways take the view that London Road will benefit from improved walking and cycling facilities and have slower speed limits than at present. However, we have not seen definitive proposals from the Highway Authority and there is no funding currently available and consequently little or no prospect of these changes coming forward in the foreseeable future. What we're also not seeing are any tangible proposals for improved transport infrastructure that would tempt residents out of their cars. Our fears are that the proposals for uncontrolled junctions along this stretch of London Road will lead to traffic congestion, particularly at peak times. That will lead to driver frustration, risk-taking and collisions. This application is for 260 homes with a single uncontrolled access to London Road. The report mentions that there will be other road links into the town, but the fact is that the only realistic route in and out of Cranbrook is via London Road. In this short stretch of London Road, in addition to the 260 homes planned for Farlands, there's 150 new homes at Ingram's, the Ingram Sports Centre, the Gypsy and Traveller site, 1435 homes at Cobden's expansion area, the only controlled junction with traffic lights, all along the north side of London Road. On the south side, directly opposite, there is the 3 Grange developments with 3 uncontrolled junctions, serving 180 homes, 89 homes and 450 homes. That is a total of more than 2,500 homes that will have to negotiate access to London Road, a road that will not only serve all these homes, but will also be the only route in and out of the wider town and the only through route for the town. We just do not understand the reluctance to provide even one roundabout that would serve access and egress to and from both sides of London Road in the same way that the existing roundabouts further to the west do successfully and safely today. I'd previously commented on the apparent failure of the developer to meet the minimum requirements of biodiversity net gain. The officer's report indicates that the developer still fails to meet the minimum requirements and is seeking to deliver excess biodiversity net gain in its off-site SANG, which will be secured through the Section 106 agreement. I trust that the officers can guarantee this. Mention is made in the report about the applicant's response to flood risk and drainage concerns, which is to move housing development away from the western boundary but concentrate the same number of dwellings in the remainder of the site. I'd commented before about the indicative layout, density and housing mix, which is disproportionately small, 1 and 2 bed properties. Ward members and Town Council have been consistent in raising concerns about the delivery of an unbalanced community in Cranbrook, and these proposals do nothing to change that. As we move away from the town centre, we do expect to see a more balanced mix of small and larger properties. Neither ward members nor town council object to the principle of development of the site, but we remain particularly concerned about the access arrangements here and about the wider access proposals for this stretch of London Road. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bloxham. Okay. Yes, please, yes. Yep, I think we're on to questions, aren't we? So that's fine. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to ask a question now before you?
No, it's Councillor Faithful wants to ask Councillor Bloxham a question. Yeah, yeah.
Right. I'm concerned that we don't seem to have, is there a plan somewhere that shows all the different developments around? Because this is just showing, it's only showing the north side of the road. So is there a plan available in all of this? I couldn't see one, because I'm not sure we can make a sound decision, but anyway, I don't know if anyone can answer that.
I thought it was a question for you. If it's not,
Yeah, I think that's one for James to answer. And thank you, Kim. All right. Okay. So we'll get James to answer that one in a moment, Peter, about development south of the road. Any other questions? Councillor Jenny Brown.
Well, I'm trying to find out on 22/0406 MOUT, which is for the 1,400 houses on London Road to the south, which is outlined and all matters reserved except for the principal vehicular access. So how is that in relation to this one?
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, I'll let James comment on development to the south of the road and what road improvements may be delivered through that as well.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Just because I've got it on the screen, if I can deal with the 22/0406 scheme and its location first, if that's all right. So that permission, which has now been issued, is for the housing, all the housing that's in white that you can see around here. That is for your 1,435 dwellings. So that wraps around the current Farland site that is highlighted in the dashed red line that sits in here. Does that clarify what you're asking? Sorry.
No, so what is the principal vehicular access that they've had to do? Have they actually had that sorted out yet?
Yes, they have. I want that one there. My apologies. So, the principal access into that 1,400 house scheme is this one here. That is a signalised junction with pedestrian crossing facilities within that junction. Again, signalised for both crossing the access into the scheme, but also with the capability of crossing London Road so that we can join up land to the north and land to the south. So that is the main access. This scheme, so the 1,400 house scheme, also joins up internally with Cranbrook. So the signalised junction is that one there. But there is a main road through that scheme that, if you can follow if we can, it is working, good. That main road goes through there and then joins in to existing main roads in Cranbrook Phase 1. So that will all link through. So there's a principal access there, and there's also a principal consented access to the north of the existing town. This scheme, which is the one that's before us, has links into the Persimmon scheme, both to the eastern boundary and to the northern boundary, as well as its main access onto London Road. Does that?
That's an awful lot of houses going to be built. Has Has anybody asked them for a roundabout?
Again, through Chair, yeah, happy for me to, fine, thank you, I'll carry on. So, roundabouts have their place, but certainly the current thinking is that standard junctions or signalised junctions provide better safety and access for pedestrians and cyclists. And therefore, that is the current thinking on that. Highway, I've spent many hours with the highway team poring over all the junctions along this section to make sure they fit together. This composite plan is the best I've got available today, I'm afraid. It does show how the junctions work along the northern side of the road. We've got one scheme that's got a resolution to approve, subject to 106, for 180 dwellings, which is on the Gribble Lane site south of the road, and that has a single access onto London Road just to the, I want to get my bearings right. I think it sits in there. What we haven't got yet is any resolution to approve the remaining 600 houses, which forms the rest of the Grange scheme. It's in as an application, or two applications at the moment, but they're not before us, and they're not committee ready yet. We're still working on those. What we've been trying to do is work with both the developers north and south of the road to make sure these junctions work together. And certainly at the moment, the thing they need some fine tuning, the ones that are coming forward to the south, but we're satisfied that there are in principle locations and junction forms that will continue to work along this whole section of London Road. The policy requirement in the Cranbrook plan is that we don't want any of the expansion areas prejudicing access into another expansion area. We are clear, as East Devon, as officers, that we need all these houses, we need all these expansion areas to come forward. If they don't, we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of housing delivery. So we are very alive to the access issues, the location junctions, and trying to make sure that they do marry. And certainly the advice I'm being given from a technical point of view from Devon County Highways is that this junction arrangement works, particularly with the signalised junction that's coming in as part of the Persimmon scheme, which will fundamentally change how traffic moves along the section of the road, because it will introduce this stop-start function to the traffic. It won't have the free flow that it does at the moment. One thing I picked up on from Councillor Bloxham that I will just address if Chair's happy for me to do so, and that is the concern that Devon County Council haven't got funding for their London Road improvements yet. That is correct. That's absolutely true. But what is known, what is certain, is that the junctions and the improvements that we're showing you on this slide are developer delivered. These are not beholden upon Devon County Council's funding. Their funding is for improvements and enhancements over and above these improvements. So I suspect that the majority of Devon County Council funding will go to improvements either end and more likely to the west of this particular scheme. These improvements are funded, will be delivered by Persimmon and the respective developers, and therefore you can have confidence in what's being shown on the slide as coming forward. There's a condition on the Persimmon to fine-tune them, but they are the delivering party, not Devon County Council, for these improvements. I hope that helps, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and that'll be subject to an S106 agreement, presumably.
It's already all bound up in 106. It's been signed and sealed, so yes.
Okay. Can I just ask what the distance is between the junctions? So you've got a signalised junction, then you're going to have a junction with a raised table. What's the distance between those? Do we know?
Not off the top of my head, I'm afraid I don't.
Not very far. Yeah, I mean, what I'm looking at is not even the width of the proposed site before the signalised junction. It's probably about 2/3 of it. I was trying to work out from the 5 metre wide cycleway and kind of working along. But we're probably talking a few hundred metres, aren't we? Right, okay.
From conversations that I've had with highways, we've been talking circa 200, but that is a ballpark figure. That's not a precise figure.
But obviously to have a roundabout 200 metres from a signalised crossing, I mean, it happens, but you can see that we have to look at this in the wider context of the other improvements that are going to be delivered. And they are going to be delivered because it's down to the developers, not Devon County Council, to deliver those. And I believe there is a plan eventually for that to be 20 miles an hour along there. It's definitely 30.
So what, Chair, sorry,
No, please.
I'll
deal
come
with
straight
that.
back if you're happy. So what we've been asking the developers to do, and we've taken a consistent approach with all the developers along here, is to design their junctions so that they are 20 mile an hour compliant, but the expectation is that it will be signed at 30.
Thank you. Okay, I've got some other questions for you. I've got 3 people lined up, so we'll take those and then perhaps you can take those en bloc. Councillor Anne Hall first.
Thank you, Chair. Noting outside the Farlands site, there's bus stops on both sides of the road. It's an uncontrolled pedestrian cross, well, it's uncontrolled. Is there actually a zebra crossing across there, or is it just that they have to take their luck with the slowing down of the traffic further up from the Persimmon site? And say, you've answered one of the questions, the proposed speed limits. And the other thought was, no, that one's already been done. It's the access for pedestrians, and is the Persimmon site also, has that actually got controlled pedestrian crossing there, so people can walk up to there? Thank you.
Okay, and we've also got Councillor Barlow, was it? Yep. Yeah.
I think it's more for debate, Chair. I was just going to point out that Sidmouth has 5,500 homes. We only have 3 accesses. We don't have any roundabouts onto the A3052. And I always think people worry about new things, but actually when you look at what's already there and what we use, traffic lights certainly slow, and that, as James was saying, that slowing of the traffic and stopping the traffic just down the road gives people a chance to cross or slow down. So I just thought I'd rest people's minds perhaps somewhat. If you think about places like Sidmouth, the actual practicalities of it do work.
Yeah, but they all drive very slowly in Sidmouth, don't they? Okay, and Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. When I read the highways thing, I'm not sure if I read it right. Is this access potentially a temporary access while Persimmon gets developed out, or is it going to stand on its own? And the second thing for me is, aren't we supposed to be discussing all the other access points onto the site, not just a bit onto the London Road, Rockbridge Strait? What's happening everywhere else? Because there doesn't seem to be much. There's only one other access point right at the top. And I would have thought, but listening to what Councillor Bloxham was saying, that we want to see more access points, not just the one on the London Road and the one at the top. And it doesn't seem to be happening.
Okay, I suppose it depends what they've actually applied for, whether they've just applied for one access or with the others to be delivered subsequently. But I'll let James pick up on that one. Can you answer those points that have been made, James?
Yes, certainly, Chair. So, in terms of the accesses into the site, the scheme, the proposal that's before you is in outline with detailed access for the principal access. So that means the one to the south. What the parameter plan that's in front of you shows is there's additional highway access being offered to the east and to the north to tie into the consented persimmon scheme, and the offer of pedestrian and cycle access into both the east and to the west. Bearing in mind that the current use, and that's already in place on the land over here, is as the Ingham Sports Hub, where we've got football pitches, cricket, and there's a multi-use games area going in down here at the moment. Having pedestrian cycle links between the two, and then effectively having this junior football pitch as an enhancement and expansion of that existing sports area is important. There'll be no point in taking highway or in taking vehicle access to this boundary, because it's got nowhere to tie into. So therefore, having connections north and east, as well as the principal one to the south, I think is the appropriate number of access points. In terms of the temporary nature of this would be a permanent access. There's no suggestion that this would be temporary. It effectively sort of provides a secondary, almost sort of backup access into the large Cobden expansion area. So it's quite helpful to have some additional access connectivity through the site as a whole. I think that addresses that question. Then the remaining one is on the location of pedestrian crossings and bus stops and things like that. So forgive me, I'm going to change. I'm wondering which plan to show it on. I'll probably leave it on this one to start with. So what we've got down here, it is just about showing. So right at the bottom of the screen, this is the site which I was trying to find on the previous map for the Goodwell Lane scheme, which is for 180 dwellings, has a resolution to approve, but 106 is still being negotiated at the moment. That has a pedestrian crossing as part of that scheme into the sports facilities to the west, of its main access. So we've got that one there. It also provides bus stops. I think it's there. So we know we've got pedestrian crossings through a formal crossing arrangement, not just informal, to the west. We know we've got a bus stop coming forward by the neighbourhood centre here to the eastern side of the current scheme. And it's then, where else do we have pedestrian crossings? We've certainly got them coming forward on the Persimmon scheme to the east of their principal junction. So we know we've got one there, and we know we've got one here. It's whether we're looking to have something in here. What we've done so far with highways is to look at an informal crossing with a sort of a pedestrian refuge in the middle of the road. It's getting the balance right between number and location of crossings and trying to keep the whole system moving. What we have ended up with is a proliferation of bus stops, which we're trying to now work out which ones we want and which ones we don't need, because you don't want a bus stop too frequently, because the buses won't stop there; they just won't use them. So we've got a little bit of work to do with highways in terms of just rationalising bus stops as well. But we do have formal crossing points set out.
Can I just quickly come back on that one, Chair? are they actually controlled, traffic lights on them, or are they just a zebra crossing? Thank you.
So the crossing to the east of the main junction is controlled. It's signalised as part of the overall signals for that whole junction. The one that is across here, I recall as being a I'm sure that one's signalised, but I would want to check for you for that before you place too much weight on that particular recollection.
Okay, good point though, because a lot of people obviously from the northern side are going to want to get buses into Exeter and therefore are going to want to get across that road. Councillor Jenny Brown.
They've actually cut the bus services down, haven't they, to just one every 2 hours, I think they're now. Also, because of the age of the application, was there a requirement for a submission of updated modelling supported by contemporary traffic surveys from the National Highways?
Okay, I've also got Councillor Bailey.
My question's relating to bus stops. Now, these bus stops, are they on the side of the road or are they in proper laybys? Because I think with all these crossings and all these lights, if the buses are in a proper lay-by where they can pull off the road, it would ease the traffic flow. But if they're just on the side of the road, as so many of them are, it just causes congestion and it's very dangerous because the car behind the bus will want to pass and it won't be able to see what's coming up the other side of the road. So I wonder if you could tell me about that, please.
Having been on a bus yesterday, the desperation of motorists to get past a bus while it's trying to pull out is, I saw a near miss yesterday going into Exeter. I'll take one more question, James, and then we'll get you to come back on those. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is a supplementary about what I was saying before. If you look at the northern section of the western boundary, that goes well beyond the sports pitches, and going beyond that, it seems like a great long wall dividing the whole section. Surely it's possible to put some sort of roadway. I know there's development happening at the moment north of the sports pitch, so isn't it possible to put a link across there somewhere so that you're joining up more? Because I mean, that's what I could see reading the comments by Cranbrook Town Council and Councillor Bloxham. You know, that's what they wanted to do, is more joined up around the rest of the community. And all we seem to be doing is going north or east, and the main town centre is to the west of them.
Okay, so a few points there, James, if you could deal with those.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I hope this plan will help explain the challenge that we've got in terms of getting a western boundary connection. We've got the sports pitches that sit in on the southern section of the land to the west, and then you've got this finger of land that then deals with the rest of this western boundary, which I think is where you're suggesting could we be crossing. In an ideal world, yes. The problem we've got is that at the moment, the approved parameter plans for the Persimmon scheme have no development in this finger of land, principally because the Environment Agency mapping updated this area as a flood zone. And therefore, Persimmon were quite right in keeping housing out of that corridor. So if we insisted on this scheme having a vehicle access to the boundary here, at the moment it's got nowhere to go. The Environment Agency were taking a fairly hard line on having any development in that particular field. Principally because of things like changes in levels and therefore the downstream potential effects of additional flooding, etc. Now, whether that situation will change in due course as further modelling work is undertaken, but certainly based on the consented persimmon scheme, we've got nothing that we can tie into through that particular field, almost entirely because of the EA's position on it. So it did leave us with only being able to access and connect it to the north and to the east, but it does allow us to at least put pedestrian cycle connections into the west, which from a sustainability point of view, it helps. It's important for making up a joined up community, so at least people can walk from the sports pitches through Farlands to the neighbourhood centre to the primary school that the Persimmon are looking to bring forward. Certainly for the scalar scheme, I think officers were fairly content that was an appropriate balance given the constraints that we've got to work to around the site. In terms of bus stops, the ones for this particular scheme are on road. We've got one in there, and the second one is proposed there. So both on road, both outside the main raised table area for the particular junction. Again, they've been through a road safety audit. So from a safety point of view, both independent auditors and the county auditors are satisfied that they are safe. And in many ways, they do help to slow traffic down. They can be a bit of a pain at times, but you can't design a road around careless behaviour or driver impatience. You need to make sure the junctions are safe and appropriate, recognising due care and attention. And certainly in this instance, all the professional advice I've been given from various highway experts are satisfied that this arrangement works. No, that's a pedestrian. So, Mrs. Ormes was just asking me there about the arrangement here. You've got the bus stop itself on the main carriageway. You've then got the pedestrian waiting area that sits between the cycleway and the highway. So you're giving people a safe place to stand without the potential for conflicts between bikes and pedestrians. And then the footway then behind the cycleway. And that configuration of footway, cycleway then extends along further across the Persimmon site as well. So it's a continuation of the whole. In terms of the traffic modelling, the National Highways have been consulted on a number of occasions on this scheme, and have been consistently taking into consideration the 260 dwellings that form part of this allocation, which obviously has gone through examination as well for its adoption. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'd like to take issue with the advice you've been given, because I've been a professional driver all my life, which is quite a long time, and I've always found that the lay-by system works considerably better regarding traffic flow, and it is safer. The bus pulls into the lay-by, the people get on the bus or off the bus, and then the driver looks in his mirror and sees if there's anything behind him. But when they're on the street as such, the driver looks in his mirror, he can't see a thing. He can't see where the traffic is. So it is potentially a lot more dangerous to have a roadside bus stop than a proper bus stop with a lay-by. I'd like to make a note that that's how I feel about that, Chair, because I don't think the advice is very sound, in my humble opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I think, yeah, but I think that's a fair point, and I've also been a bus driver in my past, where it was 1974, I think that's a fair point, and maybe one for highways to consider. And having been on a bus yesterday and being aware of where it stopped. And in my experience, the pull-in lay-bys tend to be in the more rural parts of the route, and by the time you get into the city, there's more stops on the road itself. But there's often pull-in ones, like there is at Isker College, for instance, but there are others that aren't. Okay, so do we have any more questions? Councillor Barlow, did you?
I was waiting for debate, Chair.
Okay. If we've got no more questions, then we can go into debate. Off to you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we've heard from James Brown. We've listened and talked about the various crossing points that they're putting in. We've been told that they've done a safety road evaluation, which Devon County Council have checked and done, who are the experts that we have to rely on. And much as we might prefer to see pull-ins for buses, etc., that's not what's in front of us. And again, the other accesses will be dealt with, I presume, when we go to full application, the planning matters that will come before us, where it will link up with other places in the thing. I think also we get a bit carried away. Something 260 houses sounds a lot. It's only 200 metres wide, this site. So again, we're not talking a massively wide site that you're going to have to transverse across in a car or anything like that. So I think what is in front of us is the access that you see there, the main access of it, and the environmental issues. Glad to see that South West Water are looking now at putting conditions down as to the water usage rather than just allowing us to waste it. So I would, again, recommend officer recommendations as stated before us, because I don't see any alternative, especially what we've been told by Mr. Freeman this morning. Thank you, Chair. Can I say, is there a condition on this that makes sure that it is done within 3 years rather than statutory 5? And if not, can we please ensure that it is 3 years rather than 5?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So condition 2 within the pack talks about the time periods for submission. What we have followed in this instance is the standard approach for outline applications, which is that the reserved matters need to come in within 3 years, and then they have 2 years after that in which to commence development. For the scalar scheme, I would be reluctant to recommend that we push it further than that. I think that's probably a fair approach, given that we know that the current landowners have developers on board that they're looking to sell to, but actually that all takes time. And then they've got to work up the reserved matters, they've got to submit them to us. I think there is an appetite to get on with this site, but I think we need to make sure that we're reasonable. It's a balance between pushing the timescales really tight to try and demonstrate an urgency to get on with it, but also making sure that we don't give ourselves undue work if the timescales are unreasonable and then to come back through planning in 2 years' time to have an extension or have a further 1 year's reserved matters. It just causes unnecessary hassle for everyone, in my view.
If I can, Chair, just like to say, the only great thing about a date and actually is it does concentrate minds, a bit like the last one we pushed through in 2 months.
Yes, but I think if you look at the list of conditions at the back, the number of S106 agreements that have to be drawn up, the agreements with Devon County Council on the highways improvements, I think it's not unreasonable to give them 3 years to put all that together, and I wouldn't want them to be rushing through a scheme that's badly designed. In terms of the 260 houses, I was just thinking that's probably comparable, Councillor Gazzard might help me here, with something like Mount Pleasant in Exmouth, which has one road in and going through the site. And funnily enough, that's to the east and the south, very similar to this one. So I think, and this one actually has a northern access as well, so it actually has 3 accesses. So I would have thought that was adequate. Yeah, I mean, given that everybody's going to be on bikes anyway, you know, it's, well, we'll see at the reserved matters application. I will want to be looking at that to check that there is good cycle access through the site as well as when you get onto London Road. But we have a proposal. I gathered that was a proposal, Ian. Yep. So do we have a seconder, Councillor Gazzard? Do you want to speak on? Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, quite happy to second the proposal, Chair. Like Councillor Barlow, I'm really pleased that, to hear the news from South West Water. I think that's a move forward. I would like to thank our illustrious James Brown. I think the presentation's been, although it's been long, it's been excellent. And the way that you've answered members' questions, I think, is really good. So thank you for that. And you haven't fudged anything, so thank you.
Councillor Hall might be about to disagree with you there.
Not at all. I totally agree. Good presentation all round.
Oh, no, that bit was.
The only thing I would like to be reassured with is to have pedestrian control crossing on both sides of the Farlands development, because that is crucial, because that also serves the Grange developments as well. So we really do need to make sure they're both controlled either side. Thank you.
Yeah, we've definitely got a controlled one to the east, but to the west, even assuming they got across the road at the signalised one, they'd then have to backtrack and cross Gribble Lane, I think it's called, to get to the bus stop at the other side. If we can have, do we know, James, if we what
I'm trying.
Yeah, sorry.
It's technology, I'm afraid.
No, I mean, we're asking you for information that you weren't necessarily going to have at your fingertips. But Councillor Hall's quite right to raise the question of pedestrian access, because it's one thing to have a bus stop there, quite another for people to be able to access it. I would have thought putting the bus stops next to the signalised crossing would have made more sense.
Sorry, Chair, I thought when we passed a previous one that we did put in, and it had to be, we were discussing whether it was a cycle and walkway. There was a toucan, pelican, there were so many different names, but it was a specific one for a cycle and road crossing, pedestrian crossing that we talked about before. So I'm sure there is on the west as well. But
on the western one, oh right, okay. Okay, that would be a pelican if it's, I think it's pelican, isn't it? If it's cycle and... Oh, it's a toucan. Oh, yes, toucan, because two can cross. That's right. Yeah, what we didn't get in Exmouth. James is grabbing another laptop in hopes that he can... Councillor Faithfull, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to clarify about the house numbers. Is this a matter we're dealing with now, or will that be dealt with in the reserved matters?
The actual numbers on the site will be dealt with at reserved matters, yes. It's outlined for up to, I think, 260. But the actual layout and all of those details will be dealt with at reserved matters, yeah. Okay, so we do have a proposer and seconder. Is everybody happy to go to a vote in the hope that James can find that information about the crossing to the west? Yeah, are you happy to, or would you rather wait for that information?
I would rather wait.
Yeah.
That is crucial, really.
Okay, if we're not putting too much pressure on James to...
10 minutes.
Well, I was just thinking that actually we've gone past 12. We've been going for another hour. Shall we take, shall we? Yeah, shall,
Give me 30 seconds. Just give me, he's nearly there.
oh, oh. He's got a plan. We just don't know if it's the right one. I don't know what, does anybody know what the name of the development was to the west of that? I haven't got a Cranbrook master plan.
Was it the Grange?
To hand. Was it the Grange? There's the Treesbeer.
1978.
I have an answer.
Oh,
I have an answer.
James, you know, you've just topped yourself. Well, no, not topped. Topped your performance so far, I'm trying to say. Yeah, I mean, it has been an excellent presentation so far, and this is just the icing on the cake if you can come up with,
Thank you,
with
Chair.
this answer as well.
I can't get the plan to turn round, so I'm reading at 90 degrees. But on the Gribble Lane scheme, which is the 1798 resolution to approve, the pedestrian crossing between the Gribble Lane one and Ingram's playing area is for a proposed toucan crossing to be secured by Section 278 works with highways.
Music to my ears. Okay. So that'll be going on to the west of the entrance to this site, yeah.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic.
Pedestrian and bicycle.
As toucan, so that'll be, yeah, pedestrian and cycle, yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, so on that basis, and thank you so much for getting that information for us, we can go to a vote. All those in favour?
Can we just?
Oh, sorry, Wendy. Yes. there's-
And with the 3 extra conditions.
Yes. Just point out, this is subject to the 3 extra conditions from South West Water, which I think we're all very happy with. That was a Grampian condition on potable water, buildings to have water saving in, and foul sewage plan.
I think that was 8, Chair, but can everyone just raise the hand again,
Yeah,
please?
if we could just do that one again.
Bottom one, it's
Yeah,
unanimous,
that was unanimous. And then we need to adopt the appropriate assessment as well. So all those in favour of that. And I think, yeah. Okay, not quite.
Not quite.
Councillor Faithful.
Councillor Faithful,
Okay.
adopt the appropriate assessment.
You're okay with that? Okay. Yeah, always a bit of a funny one. Okay, shall we take another 10 minutes, say 25 past, and then we can move on to at least one more before lunch, since the applicant is here. Okay.
No, no. Something else I've had to do.
You're worried about that lunch, Jenny, aren't you? Okay, so we'll move on now to agenda item 11. This is application 241816 FUL Homefield Farm, Newton Popford, pages 229 to 249 in your agenda pack. We've got Callum Moyer to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. The application being considered today is for a conversion of a barn to a 4-bedroom single-storey dwelling with private amenity space at Homefield Farm in Newton Poppleford. The application is before committee today because the officer recommendation of approval is in conflict with the comments received from the local ward member. It's also a departure from the development plan. So the aerial image shows the application site of Homefield Farm, which is encircled in red. Is that? Oh. There we go. Sorry. So yes, the aerial image shows the application site of Homefield Farm, with the barn to be converted, circled in red just up here. The main dwelling is just to the southwest here, marked by the pin. There's also been a live work unit approved on site, which is just shown here by officers back in 2019. The proposal will share the same access as the existing dwelling, Homefield Farm, and the live work unit, both of which stem off then Ottery Road, which is a C classified road. The site lies outside of the built-up area boundary, which at its nearest point is approximately 400 metres away, just down here. It also lies within the East Devon National Landscape. It should be brought to attention that a barn conversion at the site opposite at Grange Farm, just here, which was also outside the built-up area boundary, and refused by officers in 2019, was subsequently allowed at appeal, although it was 120 metres closer to Newton Poppleford. The inspector deemed that the site was accessible. So the barn itself was initially constructed back in 1994 following the grant of planning permission, and according to information submitted, has been used in the past to maintain machinery and tractors owned by the applicant. However, due to the sophistication of modern machinery, the barn's use has become redundant, with servicing and maintenance needing to be done by a mains dealer off-site. So the application seeks approval to convert it to a 4-bedroom single-storey dwelling. Policy D8 of the local plan permits the reuse of rural buildings, including conversions, outside of settlements, where they are sympathetic to and enhance the rural character of the building and surrounding area. This includes preventing harm to the countryside by means of traffic, parking, and the erection of associated structures. It also needs to be in a location which will not substantially add to the need to travel by car. Policy D8 also requires the building to be structurally sound and capable of conversion, and ensure that the conversion would not require a replacement building to fulfill a similar function. So this shows the site at present, with the barn lying in a sunken position, nestled between a grass bank on its southern and western elevation, with the land rising in both an eastward and southward direction. The proposed private amenity space is to be sited on an area of existing hard standing, just to the east of the barn, approximately here. The proposal involves removing an existing porter cabin just to the south of the barn to be converted, and the hedges both to the north, the hedge boundary here, and to the east of the conversion will remain as existing throughout. So the proposal itself is to sit within the existing frame, and aside from infilling a wall on the roof overhang on the eastern elevation, there will be no extension to the existing barn. So the roof overhang area will just sit on this section here, come down around about here at present. The proposal has been supported by a structural survey, which states the existing purlins, concrete wall panelling, and internal concrete slab floor are in good condition and can remain as part of the converted scheme. In addition, an ecological impact assessment has been submitted, stating that there's no roosting potential for bats. However, the building is used by nesting swallows, and therefore, in the interest of ecological compensation, a swift box should be installed, which can be secured by a condition. The proposal shares parking with the existing bungalow, Homefield Barn, and as we can see on this site layout plan, indicates 4 spaces, 2 per dwelling. The proposal also includes cycle parking in the form of a small shed just located here, as required by policy T1 of the neighbourhood plan. Further parking arrangements, however, should be secured by condition in order to ensure full compliance with policy T1 of the neighbourhood plan. To the east of the barn, we can see the private amenity space as shown. Further landscaping details also need to be secured, which can be done via condition. So this shows the proposed floor plan for the conversion. Due to the change in levels between the parking area, up here as shown on the previous slide, and the dwelling itself, converted dwelling itself, an area of grass bank is to be cut back, a retaining wall put in its place. However, this kind of excavation work is located solely on its southern and western side of the proposal. In terms of materials, the proposal is to be vertically timber clad and use a zinc standing seam roof. The windows and doors are to be PPC aluminium units. As the barn lies nestled between 2 banks, shown just marked here, and due to the presence of an existing hedge along the northern boundary of the site, the conversion is reasonably well screened from views outside of the site. So these are some photographs of the barn to be converted. So this photo is taken just north of the existing barn. The section of overhanging roof to be infilled with a wall is just come down here. And the porter cabin that you can see just in the background here is also to be removed as part of the proposal. This photo here is taken from Ven Ottery Road, with the entrance to Homefield Farm being located just to the right, the live-work unit straight ahead, and it also shows the public footpath just next to the site. This photo here is taken atop a bank on the south and looking northwards, and this kind of just shows you roughly where the private amenity area is going to sit. And then we've got a photo looking westward towards the conversion. This is also taken on top of the grass bank, and you can see the access that serves the live-work unit, which is just behind me where I'm stood. And this photo is a view looking southwestward. The porter cabin obviously is going to be removed as part of the scheme, but you can see the change in levels obviously heading towards kind of a south direction, that the land does rise up. just want to return to the aerial photograph a second. So due to the site's distance from the built-up area boundary, the works conflict with policy H3 of the Newton Poppleford Neighbourhood Plan. Policy H3 states that any residential development outside the built-up area boundary must be adjacent to the built-up area boundary. Although broadly in conformity with policy D8, there is a requirement for the conversion to be in a sustainable location, which in this instance is questionable. A walk into the centre of Newton Poppleford would take approximately 20 minutes on foot along a unpaved and unlit Ven Artery road. And while there is a public footpath that lies adjacent to the site, this is just as far and equally unlit. As stated in paragraph 30 of the NPPF, greater weight is afforded to adopted neighbourhood plans over non-strategic policies in a local plan, in this instance policy D8. As the proposal does not comply with H3 and to some degree D8, there needs to be clear material considerations that justify approving a development that's contrary to the development plan. This justification comes both as a result of a recent appeal decision at the neighbouring site Grange Farm and due to the proposal's adherence to paragraph 84C of the NPPF. The recent appeal decision at Grange Farm, immediately opposite, as shown here, was deemed to be accessible by the inspector. The proposal, which also involved converting a barn to a dwelling, was determined to be compliant with Strategy 7 and, by extension, Policy D8. As this was for a conversion, the inspector also concluded that it was not tantamount to the creation of a new dwelling in the countryside. The subsequent adoption of the neighbourhood plan, in particular Policy H3, however, is silent on how conversion should be considered. Given the proximity of Grange Farm to Homefield Farm, it is the officer's view that this site would be equally accessible to Newton Poppleford. In light of the appeal decision and policies within the local and neighbourhood plan, the work should also be assessed against the reuse of a redundant brownfield site whilst enhancing its setting, which is supported by paragraph 84C of the NPPF. In terms of enhancement, the proposal does include the removal of the existing porter cabin to the south, which at present sits on top of a bank and is significantly more visible in the landscape than the barn itself, and does not make a positive contribution to the landscape character. The conversion would also improve the appearance of the barn, keeping its existing form and mass while updating its materials to match that of the live-work unit on site, and therefore there would be a consistent palette of materials on site. The proposal involves changing an area of existing hard standing to a private garden space. Subject to appropriate landscaping and boundary treatment, it is the officer's view that this too could enhance the site. While domestication of an agricultural setting can be harmful, this too can be prevented by the removal of permitted development rights through a suitable condition. In addition to, and since the publication last week of the new NPPF, the LPA needs to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. At present, we do not have a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore the tilted balance applies in favour of sustainable development. As this proposal involves converting an existing agricultural building to a dwelling, it would contribute towards boosting the housing stock. In summary, whilst there is a conflict with Policy H3 of the Neighbourhood Plan and Policy D8 to some extent, the proposal on balance is considered sympathetic to the national landscape and open countryside. As such, it is the officer's view that the proposal would enhance its immediate setting in accordance with paragraph 84C of the NPPF. With the recent appeal outcome clarifying that the conversion of a barn to a dwelling in this location is suitable, it is considered that the benefits of this scheme outweigh the harm, and therefore the proposal has been put forward for approval.
Thank you very much, Callum. Covered a lot there. So we'll hear from the applicant, Chris Drake, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, and thank you for your time. I'm going to start by apologising. I'm quite heavily dyslexic, so I'm going to do my best, but I won't be as fluid as some of the other ones by a long shot. In a nutshell, we have a redundant workshop on our farm. You saw a tractor in the picture there. They have as much technology in as a plane now. It used to be that you buy a manual for your car and fix it at home. Those days are now gone as well. I wanted to try and tidy up the site, offering to get rid of the porter cabin that's been there for around about 20 years as well, our previous farm office. I'm a fourth generation at this farm. I bought it off the estate after my grandfather passed away. I have 4 children. My eldest is in his 20s and has worked on the farm for 5 years. I'm not a developer. I want to keep this as part of my family hub, and hopefully my children can be housed in it. We had a pre-application, was very helpful, and the parish council were in support by means of a vote when I went along to that meeting. Yesterday I physically measured the proposed barn conversion is 88 metres as the bird flies further away than the last one that was passed at the Grange farm, now known as Popple Barn. It's not viewable, so the only person that can see this property is me. It's sat down, and due to us proposing to take away the porter cabin, it'll tidy it up. I also believe Newton Poppleford has a draft application for 55 new dwellings. They're actually slightly further away than mine to the village. Pedestrian access to the village from my property is actually down Venotre Road into Back Lane and then into Lark Rise. This is the same main route to the village hall and the sports facilities, so I can't see that it can be classed as unsafe. We have, yes, 4 cars on the application. It's a farm. We can house a damn sight more than 4 cars, and you can imagine, can't you? We could easily pack 10 cars into there with ease. There's, again, no new road access needed whatsoever. And I genuinely feel, I've watched that you've just talked about mass housing and stuff like this. There's a lot of us farmers out there that have rundown buildings that can be, converted very, very nicely and become beautiful things. And I just want to see a bit more of that, to be honest with you. I think most of us have got children and we want them to live in the countryside, but nobody wants to let their barns be converted, and it makes no sense. There's a lot of small barns in the area that could be really tidied up and done in a nice way. And that's what I'd like to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Bless you, Brian. Councillor Gazzard. Oh, hang on. We need to hear from Councillor Burrup first. Jumping the gun. We'll hear from you, Steve, after Councillor Burrup. Then we can go into questions. Right, over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Mr. Drake for his presentation as well. I do have some sympathy, as I've said in my notes to this application, with the applicant. Ultimately, though, we are here to uphold the principles of the development plan, the local plan, okay? And officers' own words in this application are that this strays from the local plan. It strays from the neighbourhood plan as well. It would not therefore ordinarily be permitted. We are talking about fine lines on balance. 84C is cited as planning policies and decisions should avoid the development of isolated homes in the countryside unless one or more of the following circumstances apply. The development should use redundant or disused buildings to and enhance its immediate setting. The building that I attended the site visit, the building that appears to be redundant to me is the porter cabin, not the barn. We weren't actually permitted access into the barn because it was in use at the time. So the parish councillors and myself were not able to ascertain that it was redundant at all. So committee may make its own judgments on that. So this is contrary to policy H3 of the neighbourhood plan, as it's outside the built-up area boundary. The building is, the development needs to be located close to a range of accessible services and facilities in accordance with the local plan. We've already heard that this development is 88 metres as the crow flies, or 120 metres by foot, to the property that known as Grange Farm that had a planning application back in 1999, I think it was. Sorry, 2019. That will probably be about right. 2019. We are here to, although that sets precedent, this committee refused that application. It was only upheld on appeal. And that was a borderline judgment by the inspectorate as to whether it was close enough to village amenities. It's further away. This one is another 120 metres away. So, you know, we are going further and further away what is sustainable. Officers have also cited a recent appeal decision on land as a change of use adjacent to Grange Farm, which is quite close to this application. That is not relevant. It's a change of use from farmland to residential garden, again, which this committee refused, and it went to appeal. So we are here to uphold the conditions of the local plan, the neighbourhood plan as well. So I'm asking this committee to refuse this on the basis of unsustainable development in open countryside, in accordance with its own policies on the local plan. And you know, as I say, I do have some sympathy with the applicant. I think the design is sympathetic to the environment that it's proposed in, but it's not viable in terms of its proximity to the services. So we would be in danger of setting yet more precedent by approving this, whereas at the moment our precedent and you know the previous application at Grange Farm was opposed by the my previous incumbent to this committee, Councillor Vale Ranger, and she vehemently opposed the proposal for a barn conversion at Grange Farm. So do not set a precedent. Our precedent at the moment is to refuse these applications. If they go to appeal and they are overturned by the inspector, so be it. But we can't take the recent appeal judgment as being anything to do with this one. It was a change of use of land. It was not a application for a residential development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burrow. Okay, questions? Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question to the applicant, if I may, please.
Yeah, if the applicant doesn't mind coming back to the podium and...
Thank you.
Go ahead,
I haven't
Steve.
made my mind up on this application yet, Chair. But one thing, could you just clear up in my mind, as we've just heard from our fellow Chris at the back, we've got two Chris's here, that the porter cabin is empty. Can you categorically say that the barn is not in use whatsoever and is empty, please?
So the barn is redundant. We don't use it. There is just old storage items that will be thrown away, but it's not in use for servicing the farm in any way. When it was visited, the door was open. I thought that was enough to let people go in, but I also know that the policy for H3 of Newton Popperford NDP is out of date, and given this does not contain allocations to meet its identified housing requirement, and the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I understand there is a class Q for converting barns to residential. which means the other policies are not relevant. Class Q overrides everything. And I don't understand why this application hasn't come through in Class Q rather than going through our own policies. It's because of national landscape, is it? Right, okay. I understand that now. I would say the development is sympathetic. It's at the same level, they're not going higher. And I need a question, don't I? You've already taken. Did I remember right, the permitted development rights have been taken away on this one? Thank you. Not at the moment, no.
No, not yet, but we could take them off as a
Is
condition.
it not in the
yes, yeah.
conditions?
I believe, let me just double check, I don't think.
I thought it was in the conditions
I'll
that.
just double check, let me.
Any further
Was it-
development.
let me quickly check
Any
that one.
further permitted development such as outbuildings and sheds and so on, extensions.
So, yeah, condition 7, there is a removal, sorry, of PD rights.
So yes,
Yeah,
so
sorry.
condition 7
Condition
covers
7.
that one. Okay, Councillor Jenny Brown.
Yeah, I had that query on the Class Q as well. I didn't realise that it did not, you couldn't do it if it was in national landscape. No.
Yeah, so the PD rights for Class Q conversions do not apply to redundant buildings within the national landscape. They will always need to come in for full planning.
Okay, and another question. Are farms classed as brownfield sites now?
Farmyards usually are, aren't they?
The building itself, I suppose, as it being, with it being a redundant building,
So in terms of whether we would look at it as a brownfield, so agricultural land is not normally deemed to be brownfield land in terms of how we apply our brownfield development, brownfield land policies. But it is nevertheless, a site that is already built up with a building on it. But the key policies are not our policies for brownfield site redevelopment. They are the policies that we've talked about, H3, D8, but also paragraph 84 of the MPPF. Those are the key policies that we should be looking at in terms of the assessment of this, and also the other material considerations being that 2019 appeal decision. We're not really putting a lot of, Councillor Burhart was talking about the appeal decision for the change of use of land to garden. That's not the key factor that we're looking at here. We're looking at the fact that an inspector has relatively recently deemed this a site within the general area to be sustainably located. As I said, obviously the officers, we'd previously assessed it, it was refused. That was the view the inspector took. But we do need to be mindful of that when we're making sort of a related decision.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Chris, I don't think you can come back unless somebody asks a direct question of you. So if anybody wants to allow Chris the opportunity to come back there. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to think of a question I can ask Chris, but I can't at the moment, but it might come to me. So on the actual plan, it shows there's a big difference in height, 4 foot, 1 point something meters, between the car park and the building itself. Is that disabled access, or is that, it looks like steps to me. I'm just worried that there isn't going to be access there for disabled people. And the second thing is it possible that, should we approve this, that we can put a condition on it that, because I know we've had this issue elsewhere in the district, or that I'm concerned about, where farmers are basically farming farming barns almost, that they are putting a barn up for agricultural need, and then lo and behold, a little bit later, then it's no longer needed, and they sell that bit of land off, and then suddenly it's converted to either industrial or now houses, whatever, and then they need a barn suddenly to support the farm on an agriculture which is much easier to get planning for. So is there a condition that we could put on it with the farm that that they won't apply for a barn on the farm, or is that not possible?
I don't believe we can restrict a future application or prevent a future application coming in if they wanted to apply for a barn. I think they could still do that in future if they wish to. With regards to your first question, there isn't, that is steps down. On that side of the site, there's a grass bank there at present, on that western kind of side, as shown, just kind of, it's been removed here, but no, it is steps down. There isn't a ramp or any form of disabled access down towards the main dwelling.
Do we not, by law now, have to provide disabled access, I thought, to new buildings that are going in, or not?
In terms of building regs, so there is, you don't, I've certainly seen plenty of houses built that have stepped thresholds to them that are permissible. So I believe that it would be building reg compliant.
Okay, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Well, having had the pleasure of reading the new MPPF, may I throw my hat in the ring to support the Greyfield description? It's not a brownfield site, so therefore it has to be something. I think it would qualify for the new MPF Greyfield site, Chair. Or not, I will leave that
I
to
think
Wendy
it's got to
decide
be
herself.
in a green belt to class that. I don't think we should get too hung up on what the classification of the land.
I've just said the question was asked whether it was brownfield.
Yes.
It wasn't me, it was someone else. But.
Yeah, but we just need to consider this as a conversion of an existing building.
Okay, Chair, thank you.
Okay. So, if there's no, Councillor.
I just wondered if I could ask Councillor Burrock, what he thought the difference was between the one that had been given planning and the one that wasn't. He was saying that it was 120 metres further on. And is it an easy accessible walkway or not?
The applicant stated it was 88 metres, I believe. But, I mean, you can see on the plan that they are relatively close to each other. And in terms of our policies, there's nothing that says an application that's another 100 metres or so up the road is any more or less outside the built-up area boundary than the policies cover. The question is, do we feel we can override policy H3, I think it was, which states that development should only be permitted just adjacent to the boundary, whether we feel we can override that, and whether the building is in a sustainable location, whether we think that the additional distance makes the difference there. To my mind, it doesn't. I mean, 400 metres, I don't regard as a vast distance. I mean, my house is further away from Exmouth town centre than 400 metres, and I'm not even in any way the furthest out of Exmouth.
Sorry, Chair, I was just asking Councillor Burhock.
Yeah. So, Chris, if you wanted to, I think we heard the figure already, but I think that was the question. Ian, was just how much further is this development? Yeah.
So the applicant himself has measured this as the crow flies. So that is a straight line from his property. It's 88 metres further away from the built-up area boundary of the village. It's 120 metres walking from the built-up, further away from the built-up area boundary of the village. Those who recently looked at the Strategic Planning Committee of last week, where I spoke on Newton Popperford's boundary, will actually know that the built-up area boundary does not represent the geographical centre of, it does not represent the centre of the village. The centre of the village is some 1 kilometre away, which is the centre of the village is where the facilities of the village are, being the shop, being the takeaways, being the school, being the church, being the garage. Okay, so those are the facilities that serve the village. So it is some 1 kilometre away. I will also point out in question of Grange Farm decision, which officers just referred to again, which was overturned on appeal, having been refused by this committee. That was before the made neighbourhood plan was put in place. So the neighbourhood plan at the time was out for consultation. It was not made. So that's a material difference to the consideration of any inspector right now. So I would just point that out. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yeah, I think we've gone a bit further than just answering the question. Councillor Jenny Brown.
So it was just a query, with showing the parking spaces, are they grassing over where the parking is at the moment and then digging into the grassed area to form new hard standings?
Okay, we'll just, we've got a couple more questions, so we'll just take those and then let the case officer deal with all those together. Councillor Faithful.
No, mine wasn't a question. It was basically along the lines of what Councillor Burrup has just said about the distance, that it is the wrong end of Newton Poppleford.
Well, we'll come back to that one then. Councillor Smith.
My question is just to clarify the neighbourhood plan changes, and also I think there's reference in the report to the neighbourhood plan not necessarily referencing this type of development. So I just want to see if that's right and just get clarification on a couple of things there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's quite a technical one, this, I think. Okay. Can you deal with those for us, Callum?
So with regards to the parking question about new hard standing kind of for the parking area, the parking, there is already parking within this area for the main dwelling, Homefield Farm. In terms of extending it, there is a change. Obviously, there would be a loss here of a bank cut into to facilitate movement between the parking area and the dwelling itself. But in terms of extension, I just jumped to, oh, it doesn't show on here, but there isn't an extension to the actual area at present. Like I said, there's a cutting in to facilitate the steps, but not to the driveway itself. There is a small note on here, but it's quite small, that kind of mentions this to be retained.
And then, Chair, I'll just come back on the question about policy H3. So in terms of the sequence of events, the appeal decision, the 2019 appeal decision, which granted permission for the barn conversion at Grange Farm, did, as Councillor Burhart mentioned, predate the neighbourhood plan being made. However, for policy H3, does say that any residential development outside the built-up area boundary must be adjacent to it, and the plan itself is silent on how to consider reuse of redundant rural buildings, barn conversions, etc. And now, again, policy H3 is a more recent policy than the local plan policy D8. However, we do have to look at the MPPF and conformity with the MPPF. And the MPPF is clear that it does allow for the creation of new isolated dwellings in the countryside, where they will, which involve the use of a redundant agricultural building, which is what we are being, told that this is a redundant building that the farmer no longer requires. So that's the policy context that we've had to effectively put in the balance. And today we're also putting into the balance the issue of 5-year housing land supply, need to be promoting housing, although again I would just caution that in the A or in B you do not need to apply the tilted balance, but we still are also mindful of housing supply being something that the council's bringing forward. So it is a finely balanced consideration that officers have made, but we have had an assessed, and it is, and you've probably heard me sitting before saying there's no safe pedestrian routes, it's an unlit rural road, it's not a sustainable location for development, and you will have heard me say that on previous occasions of similar situations. However, we have an inspector that has said that he actually acknowledges that people are likely to travel by car, but that the amount of use by car will be minimal, and he felt it would be acceptable. And he approved it. And there's been no material change. I don't think this is materially different in terms of the nature of the road, the nature of the traffic, the nature of the route, for us to be able. I think that appeal decision is quite significant in terms of how we would assess this particular site in this particular circumstances, which is why we are recommending this one for approval on this occasion.
Okay, is it a question, Ian? No, that's fine. I'm just checking there's no more questions, and then we can go into debate. So, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully, and as Mrs. Ormsby has just said, it's very finely balanced. And I've read all through it. I've read the local council's support, and I listened to what Councillor Burrup has said against the thing. And I also know that you don't have the tilted balance in an AONB. However, we have got to get the houses there. This is you've then also got the appeal decision in 2019, very close by, and much as I understand that neighbourhood plans are important and back up that, that is always trumped by an inspector giving an opinion on something. And so close to this one, I just think that we would be, if we were to go against it, and then it would be appealed, I'm not saying you would get costs on it, but I think we would be, it wouldn't be easy to defend something when right opposite you've been said that you can have it. And looking at it with all those things taken into account, and the building isn't changing, as in the view of it, when others that we've got coming in front of us are dubious as to whether the barn could actually be converted. I think this will convert. I would have to support the officer's recommendation again on this one, and would propose support.
Okay, I'll allow a bit more debate, but do we have a seconder for that? I think Councillor Brown was first there. So we have a proposer and a seconder, but we'll just hear from some more members. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I've seen other places in East Devon which are developments as such, but have been approved even though they're in the open countryside. Trying to get this in perspective, this is a family farm which we hear has been run for 4 generations, which is an unusual thing to go that long, so they've obviously been working hard at it. And this is for its family to live in, so they can stay there for a 5th generation. It's not a development so the farmer can make a profit. It's a development so the farmer can carry on farming with his family. And I think that's the main thing we seem to have forgotten about.
Well, no,
the-
because it's not a relevant
Well,
planning
I beg to
consideration.
differ. I think it's very
Brian.
relevant, Chair.
Well,
Because
we're
there
always
are reasons
encouraged.
why a development is done. One is usually for money. But this gentleman is not making it for money. He's making it so his business can continue within his family. And that's the point I'd like to make. We've passed other things in the past which have been, to use Mr. Barlow's word, dubious, which is a splendid word, which you're aware. So I'm totally in support of this, and I wish the farmer well. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I'll just point out that is not a planning consideration, and we're always encouraged not to take the personal circumstances of the applicant into account. You know, much as we might have sympathy with their position. So we need to decide this on policy grounds and whether we feel that there is sufficient policy support or sufficient reasons, there's not policy support, but sufficient reasons to kind of ignore policy on this occasion. Councillor Anne Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I also support this application. It's sympathetic to its setting. It's barely visible. But I do have one little concern. One of the conditions was saying that there were swallows there, but they're putting in swift boxes. Swallows do not use swift boxes. They are specific for swifts. So could we just amend that one, please? Because I did check that on that one. Or you could put both in, but yeah, thank you.
I think the swallows will usually build their own, won't they? But Swift's boxes do encourage them, but the swallows will quite often simply build their own nest under the eaves, and it does have those nice eaves from the look of it. So it would have those. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I would say this is quite a long way out. You know, the way around there, as the crow flies, is a long way different because you have to go all the way to the west end of Newton Poppleford down that lane and then turn left to get to anything of Newton Pop that you want to get to. I'm a little bit puzzled why there's all this talk about having the fun. If there's justified reason for them to live on site, then surely they can just get planning permission for agricultural workers dwelling, depending what sort of agriculture they're doing on there. So I'm a little bit puzzled at all this, and then you lose the use of a perfectly good building for doing your agriculture. You have to turn around and build another one. So it does seem a bit, I mean, maybe it's difficult to argue against it, but then we have to turn around and say, well, yes, you can build a new barn for doing your agriculture. We've already lost a agricultural building by the look of it next door for the previous application. I mean, unless we're just growing crops for anaerobic digesters or something, which seems to be where an awful lot of everything goes these days. But for normal agriculture, there's perfectly good reason to have an agricultural workers dwelling. So why are we having to do this?
That's a fair point. The same criteria would still apply. Is it a sustainable location? Plus there'd be a burden of proof that that agricultural workers dwelling was actually needed. But it would, yeah, would certainly strengthen the application. Do you know why that didn't come in, Callum? Did that form part of the discussions?
I'm not, well, in terms of why it came in, I don't know why it didn't come in as agricultural workers dwelling. But yeah, I'm not too sure why it just went for conversion. They did do a pre-app prior to this application, which myself I didn't deal with, but I believe discussions would have been had then.
Okay, well, we've just got to deal with the application that we have. Do we have any further speakers? So we have a proposal to accept and seconded. So
Can I come back before
yeah,
they go to
yeah, Mrs. Ormsby.
Just before, so we would propose that if that any vote is taken on the basis of adding a condition to require removal of the porter cabin prior to the barn conversion being occupied as a dwelling, because it is part of the sort of the argument for enhancement of the site. So we would suggest that's added as a further condition.
Agreed, totally.
Okay.
Thought it was.
Happy for that condition to be added. Okay, so with that extra condition, that's a good point, and with the conditions as set out, let's have all those in favour. And against? One. And I don't think there were any abstentions. It was all bar one. Councillor. Yeah. Councillor Faithful voted against. Okay, so that one is passed. Thank you all for your patience. Looking on my watch, I see it's now 1:20. So we've kept going on chocolate so far. So we will now break for lunch. And what you want to do the last one and then have lunch? What's the general feeling? I don't think it makes much difference either way, unless you want to get away and not stay for lunch.
I certainly want to stay for lunch, but I just believe it would take longer if we have a break, stop, and then start again, because Damien might be back in time.
I think, given that it's 1:20 and everybody's probably getting fairly hungry, and that the next application could be quite contentious, we could end up spending quite a lot of time on it, and we might be better coming back to it when we are refreshed. If that's okay with Chris, you're very welcome to join us for lunch, Chris. Okay, so we will now break for lunch. How long should we take? Should we come back at 2 o'clock? Yep. That gives us just under 40 minutes.